Well, Haley, I was in Canadian Tire over the weekend and I already saw some Christmas decorations going up. And that always signals to me that it's the holiday shopping season, of course.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience too. It's hard to believe we're already into November.
I know
It's
it's
coming.
it's still like technically 2 months away or just about there. But look, it can be a challenging time for a lot of people when it comes to accumulating debt, especially when they're out shopping. But, BC, it actually might be better positioned than some other provinces when it comes to avoiding a lot of insolvencies. We have some new data out recently, and we'll be talking about that with Jeffrey Schwartz. He is the executive director at Consolidated Credit. Jeffrey, I want to thank you once again for joining us on the show.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, always good having you on. And I understand that the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy Canada released some new data with regards to insolvencies. Can you shed some light on me how BC is faring compared with other provinces across Canada?
Well, truth be told, BC is doing actually quite well. If the report that came out shows data that ended for August 31 of this year, and if you look at it year over year, consumer insolvencies in British Columbia are down about 2.8%. And when you compare that to the national average is up about 4.2%. So BC is doing pretty well.
We've definitely hear a lot from various banks, economists saying that the BC economy quite diversified. What are some of the provinces that haven't been doing so well at this point?
Well, as you can expect, I mean, from all the news, we're going to see those that are supported by the oil industry are running into some challenges. So Alberta is up about 38%, Newfoundland is up 32%. Saskatchewan's up about 30%, and even Manitoba is up about 18%. And then in contrast, much like BC, Ontario's doing okay, and they're down about 0.7% year over year.
Now, as we know, sort of resource prices, they run in cycles. Is seeing increased numbers when it comes to insolvencies something that sort of happens on a cyclical basis as the resource sector is hit?
Well, I think it's regional, and it's definitely dependent upon what's going on in their economy. We saw, if you go back to kind of 2008, 2009, when there were a lot of issues with the car industry, Ontario was deeply affected. And as we're seeing now, the oil industry is a big producer of jobs in Canada. And when that kind of goes by the wayside, we're seeing that those provinces that support it are struggling.
So British Columbia is doing well. What can other neighbors of ours, across Canada, what kind of tips might you have for them to avoid these sorts of insolvencies?
Well, I think this is a personal thing, and really we're seeing reports where Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck, or almost half of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck, and that's a sign that if there is any change in their economic situation or their personal financial situation, they're going to run into trouble pretty quickly. So that's one of the warning signs. And what we need to do is get people back on track with savings so that if there is an interruption in their income, or if they are lost some hours at their work, they're able to weather the storm for a little while because they've got some savings put away. And that's the first place I'd start.
How has how Canadians save changed maybe over the decades? Because I mean, if someone does lose their job because a particular sector in the economy is hard hit, there are some programs in place that can maybe get them by in the short term, and savings would maybe be one area they could turn to for that support. But however, habits change.
Well, if you go back to kind of the late 70s and early 80s, we were saving in the high teens and almost 20%. So of each paycheck, we were putting a significant amount away, and then that would hopefully set us up with a little bit of a nest egg in case things change. Now that number is dropped to less than 5%. So we're really not putting a lot away. And anytime we have an issue with respect to an unexpected expense or something that's not included in our budget, we have to turn to debt to satisfy that need. And that's really exacerbating the problem. Ultimately, we're in a society where many Canadians are around instant gratification. So I want it, I buy it, as opposed to I want it, I save it, then I save for it, then I buy it. So there's a couple of things here that are contributing to the issues that some of these Canadians are having and potentially forcing them into insolvency.
We're speaking to Jeffrey Schwartz. He is executive director at Consolidated Credit. And on that thread there, Jeffrey, and I mentioned it earlier, Christmas shopping season's already started. During the holidays, people are spending a lot of money. Maybe they are putting some of it away. But I mean, what is this a big issue that people are accumulating even more debt during this particular part of the year?
It definitely is, and it doesn't have to be that way. I think we're even seeing some people accumulate debt during the holidays, and if they're only paying the minimum, if you look at the bottom of your credit card statement, on each credit card that you have, it could take you decades to pay it off. So what that means is you're buying something today and you're carrying it into the next holiday season and perhaps the holiday season after that, unless you're paying off your credit cards at one point. And that's just adding to the cost of that item by accruing interest. So it's a concern, especially around the holidays.
So what's the answer, Jeffrey? Is it to simply only spend within your means? Sounds very simple, although it sounds like that's maybe a challenge for many people to do.
You're right, and I agree with you that it's a huge challenge. I mean, it's very difficult to change people's behaviors overnight, and what we suggest is let's do it step by step, and that's start with a plan. Often that's the easiest way to get things done if you can stick to that plan. So create a list of the gifts that you have to buy and the amount that you're going to spend on each gift and stick to it and create a budget around that. Now here, if you're creating a budget, you kind of have only three choices. One is you go into debt, or you don't, or you modify and eliminate the gift expense altogether. And if you're not going to go into debt, that means you have to have the money on hand or have saved for it. But if you are going to go into debt, then make a plan to get out of that debt within 60 to 90 days. And that's one of those decisions that if you can't achieve that, then probably you should modify the expense or not get the gift altogether.
Well, just in your own experience, I mean, is this the time of year where, more people are going into debt, or is it maybe during the summer when people are going on vacation and then they're putting a lot on their credit cards to cover flights, hotels, etc.? Just in your own experience, what is the toughest time of year for people when it comes to putting more debt on themselves?
Well, both are tough times of year because you don't like to let your family down or let anybody down. But this is by far the busiest shopping season of the year. And as a result, it often ends up on credit cards. So people are accumulating debt if they're not paying it off. But really, it's a behavioral thing. And there are ways to go on vacation without spending an arm and a leg and taking on further debt. It could be a staycation. It could be something that you do via car. You don't have to have the expensive flights. And it's the same thing around the holiday season. I mean, what's the real reason behind the holiday season? We want to show the people around us how much we appreciate them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be some sort of material gift. It can be giving of yourself, whether it's errands, whether it's just keeping somebody company or helping them shovel the snow on their driveway. There are different opportunities where we don't have to spend the money to show them how much we appreciate them.
Definitely be a very challenging time. I'm somebody, I always like sticking to a budget when it comes to holiday shopping. Haley, what's your strategy?
Same here. Yeah, I keep a tight budget, make sure I spend within my means. And yeah, sometimes that means compromising on.
But I've never had a family member or a close friend complain about the gift that I've given to them, even if I wanted to spend a little bit more than I did that particular.
No, neither have I. It truly is, I think, around the holidays about the thought, right? And spending time together too.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd rather spend time than spend money. But Jeffrey, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
It's a pleasure.
Well, that's Jeffrey.
Happy holidays as well.
Oh, happy holidays to you. That's Jeffrey Schwartz. He's the executive director at Consolidated Credit.